Welcome to the Agile Wire, where professional Scrum trainers Jeff Boobles and Jeff Micheles discuss Agile topics. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Boobles and Jeff Micheles.
And we are recording. All right, Mr. Boobles, kick us off, man.
All right, so this week on the podcast, we have Michele Madore joining us. And Michele just recently co-wrote a book with Michael Spade, Agile Transformations, using the integral Agile Transformation framework to think and lead differently. So welcome, Michele.
Thank you.
So first, just for our listeners, can you just give a little background about, your knowledge, where you came from, what you've done in your professional career?
Sure. So, it's a long life here, so I'll try to hit the high notes. So my professional career didn't start in Agile. It started many years ago. Actually, I started out in sales a long, long time ago. And I was really interested in customer relationships. So I did a lot of customer relationship type things for many years. But then I ended up being in the telecom space and, doing the whole climb the corporate ladder thing and leading a pretty large organization, a couple of pretty large organizations, leading divisions, startup expansion markets, starting up divisions within organizations. At that time, if you remember, there was a lot of acquisitions and mergers in the telecom space. That was, the whole late 90s. Yes, I'm that old. That was the whole late 90s, what was going on with the mergers of telecom companies. So being a leader at that time, I really experienced a lot of what I think we experience in the Agile world, or just as any leaders experience right now, which is the different companies with different cultures and, what you have to experience when you go through a lot of change like that. And today we're going to talk a lot about change. And so during that time, it's when I would say that I became very aware of the fact that there was more of a need to work with the human side of things to change, because that's what I was experiencing. I was hiring people and then having to let people go. We were getting these brand new clients from, the acquisition, and they had relationships with the prior companies. So, there was all of that. And then there was like us taking them down out of service and, having to work with a very different culture, a different way of working with clients than we were used to. So I would say that's where I got started, and a love for working with the human side of change, and also the coaching aspect of my leadership role. So I began to see how I was going to need to work with people differently. I was going to need to embrace more of a coaching leadership. And so I started down the path of doing professional coaching before I was even exposed to Agile. And I really saw a difference in how I was working with my team members and how I was managing the change and the complexity of the change that we were experiencing. So that was probably the beginning of my coaching and real change management side of things. So I did study, organizational behavior for a while at university, and then later in life went through a more rigorous certification type program that was integral in nature and conscious. It was a conscious journey. And so, and it was also a very disciplined and structured change management tool that I was able to bring to the space, but more from a Teal, if we're talking the colors in our transformation framework, more from a Teal lens. And that's been very helpful. So in terms of my career, I think everything that I experienced brought me exactly to where I am today.
Sure. And what are you doing now, Michele?
Okay, so what am I doing now? A little bit of everything, maybe. I try to keep get my hands dirty, and I don't ever want to just become a trainer. So I like training, but I feel like being in with the clients and doing the work keeps me more relevant and up to date on what's happening out there. So I do a mix. I keep a mix of work. My portfolio is mixed with working with enterprise coaches. I'd like to say, let me backtrack a little bit. I'd like to say that my work, even though I'm a consulting company, much like you just said, Jeff, even though I'm a consulting company, I would think that I'm more of a development company. So it's about development of people leaders, teams, and organizations. It's a developmental journey. And so all of my work is developmental in nature. So even the training I do, it comes from a developmental angle of not just like horizontal growth, but vertical growth. How do I change my thinking and my way of taking different perspectives? So I work with enterprise coaches to train and to coach them. I do a mix of one-on-one leadership coaching and executive coaching, as well as training enterprise coaches or people that want to work more at the enterprise level. And then I go into organizations and I work directly with leadership teams and with people that are trying to go through change and they're feeling stuck. So a lot of times they'll call me to help them get unstuck. I like it when people call me when they're ready. That's so much easier than what I know a lot of coaches go through is trying to feel like you're in there and you're pushing something that people don't want. And I get that because I've spent many years in that way.
How do you know if an organization is ready or a person is ready for change? Like, what are your indicators? Like, what do you look at?
Well, there's probably a number of things that I could probably sense into, and I'm not sure these folks are ready. One being if leadership is not, and you guys know this, if leadership is not part of it, if they're not committed to being a part of the change, if they're just trying to delegate it, it's an early warning sign. Even who they put on the sales call, and how they go about the process of the sale. In that process, I can usually tell. Yeah, I could tell by the questions they're asking, what they're focusing on. A lot of people want to do, an hour, 2-hour leadership training. You can easily tell, they're not going to be in this. They're delegating this, and they don't see that they also have to change. And this is nothing new. I think all of us are realizing this. None of this is anything new. It's been going on for a while.
Yeah, when I think of change when I'm coming into an organization, if I come in at the C-suite level, like, not that it has to be the C-suite, it just means that they care that much about their culture, they care about the structure, they care about the results. They understand that Agile isn't just for the people doing the work, it's for everybody in the organization. This is a much bigger change.
Yeah.
I mean, this is everything, when we're talking about a transformation like this. So,
it is. Yeah, good point. And I was going to say, I even just had a recent example to answer the question with an example. Recently, I was a pretty high level leader in an organization calling to see if I would come on board to do some coaching, be part of their coaching team from an external point of view, because they had internal coaches, but more from a business, level. And she didn't know the Agile language, she didn't have to speak. But she knew the whole thing that, has become a little bit of buzzwords, which is the being and the doing of Agile. And she said, we've got this doing down, but we don't have the being down. So I just need you to come in and help, because our culture is just not, this is why, Agile's really not working. I could see that's the reason it's not working, because our culture is not supporting it. And bingo, as soon as I heard that, I knew she was ready for me to come in there because she recognized why they weren't being as successful as they expected to be, and why you can't just tell people to change their mindset and it's just going to happen. So that's an example of, okay, I could see she's more ready than other leaders might be.
So what is it about a culture that kind of rejects that type of change, or what is it about a culture that perpetuates doing Agile versus being Agile?
Yeah, that's a big question and a good one. Well, if we got into, it's a complex question. If we got into, the colors a little bit from the framework, are you familiar with the colors, Jeff?
From Low and yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and everybody talks about Teal, and for a while it was like, come help me be a Teal organization. No, can't do that. But I would say that one of the things is, if you're thinking of it from the framework's perspective, Agile comes in at this green level. That's where Agile starts to play at. And most organizations are in that amber orange, which is achievement oriented, goal oriented. They're coming from a more reactive, like when I say reactive, not just reactive like in a negative way, but reactive from an autopilot way. Like, this is the way we've always done things. And so what's happening for leaders is they're not comfortable getting outside their comfort zone yet, because their worth, their identity, everything is tied to something else.
Mhm.
Like, if I'm seen as a competent leader, if I'm seen as intelligent, if I'm seen as being liked and loved, if people like me. So when you're in that socialized mind and you're coming from that place, then achieving something is the most important thing to you. So if it feels risky, sorry, I think I had something in my sunlight. If it feels risky, then it's not going to feel safe for them. And
Mhm.
so it's that safety, was pretty much for all of us. When we're afraid, we don't feel safe. And so if leaders are feeling like, yeah, I'm not sure if I go down this agile path right now, I'm going to be safe. And I need to, I got this, everybody's looking at me. So there's a mismatch in the culture. Back to the question, there's a mismatch in where the culture is currently. It's not a culture of safety, possibly. It's not a culture of experimentation. And we keep touting these agile principles and values as if it can just happen, but the culture doesn't support it yet. Well, so if you're going to say, and this is another thing right now that the same leader said, we want to work on empowering decision making down to the lowest level. Sounds simple, right? No, it's not simple. And if you took that framework and you looked at one simple thing like empowering decision making, and I look at the mental models that exist right now in the upper left quadrant, and I look at the thinking that people use to solve problems. I look at the culture, that the relationships, whether they're healthy or not, the fear that exists, in an organization. If I make a wrong decision, what's going to happen to me? Right. So if I go around and look at empowered decision making from all four quadrants, I'm going to easily start to figure out that the structures and systems we have in place don't support empowering decision making. The way you reward and motivate people don't necessarily support that. So there's a lot of things in the current structure, system, and culture and thinking that aren't supporting the simple doing of empowering decision making. So what do I have to do? I have to chip away at all of those things. Like, it's just
Yep.
easy to say, but not easy to do. What does that even mean? Right? What decision do I make? And if I make this decision, what's going to happen?
Mhm.
Or what am I making the decision based on? You just made this blanket statement and everybody's just freaking out like, well, before when I did that, my boss would get furious because I went around him, or, this happened. That stuff didn't just go away because you made that statement.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, you make me think of, so I don't know, Craig Larman's been pretty influential to me in my career, and one of his laws of organizational behaviors is culture follows structure.
yeah.
And so if you don't have the structure in play, or whatever your structure is, your culture will follow that, right? And then you're going to tolerate a certain whatever culture that you have. And so I think, yeah, you're echoing that exactly. So
Yeah.
I don't know what.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Jeff. Go ahead.
I was going to say, but that's a really hard place to start, especially for internal change agents that I find. Like, how do I want to change the structure? Like, maybe we have component teams, or we only work on one application, but really the whole experience that we work on is across all these teams. So now we have this dependencies. And if I don't get it quite right for this team, then there's this blame game, and that's our culture. And so it's all about, protecting yourself.
Yeah.
And if that's where you live, that's a really hard thing, I think, sometimes for an internal change agent to change, because you need this catalyst for change. So if you were to recommend something to an internal change agent, and they're like, I see these problems and I've been banging my head against the wall and it doesn't seem like I'm making any progress, like, where would you tell them to get started?
Yeah, so that's the question everybody asks. Where do I start? So even when we use, and we haven't really introduced, I'm talking about the framework, and we haven't
Yeah.
really said what's the framework. So sorry if I just brought it in. It's just, part of what I do. um, so here's the thing. People will, when we use the framework, the integral framework, sometimes we say it's a systems thinking tool. So you can take anything and you can put it in the middle, and you can look at it not only from all four quadrants, but from all altitudes of the colors. People refer to the colors; those are the altitudes. And you can even look at different lines that are going on in each quadrant. And so you can take anything. So people can say, well, if we just changed culture, because I was going to go on to the statement you just made, because you said, structure follows culture. I think that's how you said it. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Cultures follow structure.
Culture follows structure. So the reason I said it that way is because it's both. It's both. So transformation of one requires transformation of the other. So some people will say, well, if you just change the structure, then the culture will follow. Not necessarily. Because you can you notice if you can put a structure in place and your culture can reject it because it's not where their current thinking is, it's not their culture, their relationships, how their structure is set up and has been set up. So if I just change the structure, and we've done this with SAFe frameworks, we've done this with Agile in general, and it doesn't fix the culture. So you have to work on both of them. So what we say is, if you're using Integral as a tool, and we say this in the book, and Jeff, I know you read the book, but it's a model that can help you see more clearly what's going on, just like any kind of assessment would, so you can act more effectively. So does that mean I always start in the thinking? Because people will make the case that, oh, no, you start in the thinking. Well, sometimes a structure creates thinking.
Yes. Yep.
And creates behavior. Right. So what do I want to leverage is really the question, and what can I leverage is more the question I like to ask or think about. So when you've done your due diligence and you're looking at what's happening in your core organization, what's present in here, and I sense into this for me to leverage. What can I leverage? And to me, I'm working I'm working both together. Maybe you can't do both things at the same time, but I'm not just going down one path. It's very iterative in nature, right? I'm not going down one path. An example of that where people just say, maybe you've experienced this, or both of you experienced this. People say, well, we're just going to get the doing part down.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll just get the doing part down, and we'll work on the mindset and the culture later. Well, what happens?
It's in name only. That's what happens. You put lipstick on the old process is what you just did, That's
exactly.
what it makeup.
Well, so then people wonder why our let's just use team level stuff, why our scrum meetings are status meetings, because what you just said. So I have, because they go together. You can't extrapolate them. An agile practice the intention of it was meant for it to come in at a green place with collaboration, with transparency, with openness. But because a practice equals intention plus behavior, notice that's intention upper left quadrant, behavior upper right. When you have a practice, you need intention plus behavior. That's the formula. So my behavior is going to match what my intention is. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
I can't just say, well, we'll do the doing now and then the being later. Well, you're doing the doing the same way you were doing it before. And so then why are you doing it?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I find a better approach to just almost like, I call it carve an org within an org. And I've heard that term used other places. I'm not sure the origins of it, but like do all of it. Like the whole integral model works really well, but like just do it in a smaller piece. Like if you don't want to adopt it in your, 5,000 person company, just carve out 50 person area that we can say this is an independent value stream that delivers something to the organization, and let's try it right here and prove that it works. I don't know. Do you try something similar when you're kind of getting started with an organization?
Yeah. So first of all, with the integral framework, it isn't something that I necessarily take in and say, we're going to use the integral framework. People don't easily understand it. It's not something you install.
Yep.
I don't want people to even think about it like that. So it's not like SAFe where you're going to go and you're going to, even that has gotten misused, and like anything else, just like Scrum and Kanban have done the same thing. But coaches really, so in our enterprise coach program, it's a cohort that goes for like 7 months, not 7 years. That would be the death of somebody. Goes for 7 months. And in that program, they're using the integral framework. So we have lots of testing going on with the framework, but they're using it kind of in the background. So and at some point where other coaches or leaders start to want to know more or understand it, it can be very helpful in conversations. But it's not really something we say, okay, here's the integral framework. We're going to install this and you're going to use this for your change management tool. Not really the way we're going about it. Some people might be, but it's not the way I go about it. I do think it's a great tool for a coach, for a change agent to use. A consultant can use it as well. But as people understand it, so I'll go lightly, I'll tread lightly. So I might get, back in the day when we were in person, I actually did this right the week that COVID hit. I was with an organization in Arizona, and they called me in because they had tried to do a change. And this is really a cool example. They had tried to do a change. They read the Frederick Laloux's book, Reinventing Organizations, and thought, oh my gosh, this is what we need to do. This is perfect. This is the kind of structure we need. So, and they, if the DoD can do it, and the examples they had in there, I think we can do it. And they loved what they read, and they were going about it for the right reason. They just didn't know anything about Agile. They didn't really understand. They didn't understand integral. They really didn't understand the colors very well. So they just went about it the best they could. And so here's where they could see later when I started drawing on the board how they approached this change. It was a big change they had to do. They changed the structure of the teams. They did a lot of work there. And when they did it, they did this change over a long period of time behind closed doors. They were deciding for the people. Nobody knew about what was going to happen to them for like a year. And then all of a sudden they rolled it out, like in a big meeting, there's a big PowerPoint going up. People are looking up and they're seeing themselves on a new team. They've lost their direct reports. They don't know what's happening. They don't even understand the role that they're seeing they're put into. And they're like, so the whole, culture, the relationship suffered. They kind of shut down. Everybody shut down a little bit. And the change didn't go very well, even though the intention was for, we want to be more Teal. Mm-hmm. They didn't take into consideration that the culture that they had there was unable to do what they wanted to do. The culture, the relationships that already existed weren't able to do this. And the thinking and the way they went about change in itself wasn't very conscious. Right? So they were doing it behind closed doors. What's that? That speaks for the culture. So, and I could keep on going with this example because there's so much to it. So what I did was I got up on the board and all I did was draw the 4 quadrants and drew circles with colors. And that was it. And I said, okay. And I did exactly what I just did when I was talking to you. I said, you did this. You were trying to change a structure, lower right, make it a teal structure. Great. Awesome. Beautiful. I see your intention there. It's lovely. However, this is how you went about change. And in the book, we talk about integral disciplines, and one of them is evolving conscious change. So you went about change unconsciously from your current culture, from your current way of thinking as a leader. And this is the result you had, but it was for a very good thing. So there's not ill intention there. In that, and that's the thing we always have to be compassionate about. It's not ill-intended. It's just such a holistic approach you need, and people aren't used to that.
Right. Looking at it from multiple different angles. I think that's the hard thing, right? To get to that level of consciousness and remove yourself and say, okay, how can I look at it this way and this way and this way? And you had some nice techniques inside of the book there that kind of illustrated maybe how to do that. So, journaling, writing about it is one, right, that you talked about. Yeah. Another one was just talking to a colleague, I think, about it was kind of the second one. Then walking through the role play of what might happen from this stance or that stance.
Yeah, great.
Yep. So those are the good ones. I've used it personally, just the integral model working with different leaders and just to be like, where are you spending most of your time? Just as more of an awareness, because that's usually where I start. Okay, it seems like you're spending a lot of time over here on the upper left, or you're spending a lot of time over here in the bottom right or something. Why only here? What about these other areas? Who's taking care of that?
Beautiful.
And then maybe at least there's some awareness of like, wow, I am not paying attention to the culture at all and what's happening at the water cooler and what's happening on the teams.
Yeah.
I need to focus on that, right? Because
Perfect.
my normal stance is maybe down here. And so I think there's a lot of awareness that can come from it. Maybe that's where you start. I don't know. I think without transparency, you can't inspect and adapt anything. So
You can't.
first level, right? Get some transparency of what you're doing, and then maybe then you can make some changes.
Spot on, Jeff, because it's awareness that for everything, anything. So even our own personal development, until we have, that's why 360s are so great. Until we have awareness, and sometimes that comes from feedback from other people because we have blind spots, and it's our own, deep dive into our own self-awareness. And so nothing changes without awareness. And so that's spot on. You need some awareness. And so awareness can come, as you said, when you go into an organization and you just notice what's happening. You just observe and you notice, oh, I notice you're paying attention to this or that. And you're not paying attention. I wonder why you don't have some items in your change strategy that speak to the culture or speak to, how the thinking or the leadership development piece of it. So it's a notice at first, and that's where your coaching stance comes in so beautifully and should come in, because the more you just tell people, the more they're just going to resist, right? I mean, all the training and telling and advising in the world isn't going to shift the inner game at all. And so it's like the noticing, the stating what you observe, and then going into inquiry with them and being really curious, not from like, all right, I got to ask some questions here, but I'm trying to lead them to where I want them to go. It's really being curious about what they care about, what they feel stressed about, what they're being asked to do from even higher up. And so all of that is weighing on a person. And so they almost feel like, I don't have time for this relationship stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so how can I get started slowly working into that and building pieces of that into my change strategy? And I think having a change strategy is super important. And what I've noticed in many Agile transformations, if we're calling them that, that's the name of the book. Sometimes I wish it wasn't. Missing, because we have all these enterprise coaches, and part of their competency is actually guiding the change process. That's one of the competencies. And guiding the change process includes having a change strategy. And, maybe not like the whole linear, way where we think about it back in the day, but how is your change strategy conscious and include parts that are going to address the culture issues? Because without that, you're going to get the same results that you're getting now.
So I want to dive into that. Why don't you like the Agile Transformation part of the title? Like what are your thoughts there?
I opened up a can of worms.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that I don't like, well, maybe I do. Let me get honest with myself. So because it's a buzzword.
Yeah.
And the two buzzwords, it's a buzz phrase. And it's just been misused, abused. It's actually not thought of as, when you likely both work with a lot of organizations. Everywhere you go, banks, insurance companies, traditional or federal agencies, it's everywhere. Everyone says Agile transformation. And most of the ones I've worked with, which is a lot of them, they don't actually want a transformation. If you really look at the word transformation, what is it you want? Many of them don't really want a big change. They just want you to come in, go to IT, spend time with the software delivery teams, and get them doing Agile. I've been in many organizations, maybe you've experienced this, where the business will say, you guys over there in IT need to get this right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You both
definitely. Yep. Yeah. The reason I don't like the word Agile transformation or phrase is it makes you think that it's going to be done.
Yes.
Like it's never done. It's a journey. That's, just like culture is never done. It's a journey, like these are things that go on forever.
Yeah.
Also like,
think about your own life on that note. Like, as our own personal transformation, oh, well, I'm done. Well, how arrogant would I be if I said, I've arrived. I'm Teal now.
Right.
Right? No.
And all of this stuff, like any of this like personal change or organizational change, like it takes a level of humility, and like this just doesn't represent that to me. Like just kind of like what you were saying there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it's there. It's the one good thing about it. And maybe this isn't a good way. And I didn't do this consciously. I mean, when Michael and I came up with the title, and it's a long subheading. It's like a mouthful. So, um, honestly, it turns out it is catches people's attention
Mhm.
because of the word is so used all over the world
Right.
and misused. So it's like, okay, are they going to say something different about agile transformation, or what are they talking about in here? And what's this integral thing? So it's catchy like that.
Yep.
But I have the other side of that is like, I don't want to talk about that. I don't even want to say agile sometimes anymore because it's not about that. What are we trying to get from agile is what it's about. And
Yeah. The word I like to use is agility instead of agile. It's like you can't just, I don't know, you can't just say I'm going to do agility. It's like, well, we're working towards agility and outside of our organization. We want to be able to be adaptive and responsive. And how do we get more of that? And so if you change it a little bit, at least talk about like maybe even starting there. Like a lot of times when I start to talk or do a different public speaking events, I'll like call that out. Like, what is this word agile? And what does it mean to you? Because
yeah,
it is such an overloaded word. People talk past each other all the time with it.
it's the big A, the big
Yeah.
capital A, right? So I totally agree with you. In fact, all my work is that's why I'm in the enterprise agility track with IC Agile. And it's the only, organization that I do any accreditations with, but for now, um, lately. So, and we just go with agility. We don't even really, in any of my classes or programs, or even my work with organizations, we're working on agility. What is it? What is it you need? What do you need to shift to have more agility?
Hmm.
Um, and so I think that's where the benefit is of it. Yeah. So, but it's named. It's already called Agile Transformation, and so we're going with it.
Yep. Yep. It's great. So, I mean, I'll tell you this, when I read the book, we can dive into the book a little deeper here. I was like, whoa, this is awesome because I tend to read a lot. And I was like, cool, it's Frederick Lowe's work. It's the integral model. It's a couple other different pieces of different things. And they're all wrapping it together and tying it, say, like, these kind of where this all meshes together. And so I thought it was great. But then as I was reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think the world's ready for this book. Like, how
Yeah.
many people are like at this point where they can understand all these concepts? So I don't know,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? Like, is the world ready for this book? Like, it seems pretty
Um,
advanced.
it is advanced. I'll answer the question and probably the way I've been answering them, which is a long, drawn out answer. If you were worried about me not having enough to say, probably changed your minds. Um, so, is the world ready? I think not the mainstream world. No, I don't think. Like, I don't even think organizations don't even really understand Agile yet. They don't even understand what an agile coach does for the most. I mean, how many times are you still answering that question? So then I moved into the enterprise space, and I'm mostly working with coaches that are trying to work at that level. And organizations don't really know at all what an enterprise coach does. So when now you start bringing all these theories in here, I think it's difficult. And the funny thing I was going to say is, we've done talks at conferences over the years, and Michael and I did a lot of them together. And we would always say we're in the advanced track. We want to be in the advanced track because you get a room full of 50 to 400, 500 people, whatever, and then everyone's all over the place, and you have 1 hour to talk. How are you going to teach the integral agile model in an hour to people who've never heard of it, and also people that have been deep diving in it and want more, and it's what we experience as trainers in general, but it's very difficult. So I've kind of resigned to, I'm not going to do that anymore because it doesn't serve, if it's got to be done differently. So it kind of a different way of thinking about it. But, you get the people that go, what do I do on Monday? What can I do on Monday at the end of the course? And you're like, okay. They didn't understand a word of what you were talking about, but they just want to know what to do on Monday. And it's a valid question. It's I need to apply this something. So there's this desire inside people to say, what can I do with this? So, what my desire when I wrote this with Michael was that we made some practical um, points in here, so that the insight to action, piece of the chapters that you read, Jeff, that was our attempt at saying, okay, here's some actions you can take right away, and they're pretty lightweight. Um, Generally speaking, I don't think the average person in an organization who's never doesn't know much about Agile is gonna really get all of this. I think the leadership development piece of this book is really important for people to read. Um, and I would say in our world right now where we are, and especially over the last couple of years with COVID, um, leaders are having to answer some pretty difficult questions, or they've got a lot of complexity they're working with. And so development and culture, leadership development and culture are two things that I'm hearing and getting, pinged about a lot. So I think that part of it is super useful in the book.
When you were just talking about that situation where you're at the conference, you've got an hour of people's time, understand that you have this entire book that you co-authored. Like, what are those points that you try to distill it down to have them take away from that 1 hour talk that you're there for?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jeff. You're good at these questions, you guys. So it's really that it's thinking of this framework like a holistic system approach. Like there's a whole system at play. And if you think about 4 quadrants, the easiest thing to think about is 4 quadrants. And people, have, like many consulting companies, have their playbook. That's like a word I don't like very much, but they have their transformation playbook. And I always cringe with some of the consulting companies I've worked for. And they'll say people, process, technology, or, they'll have, and they know people as a part of it. I actually worked for one consulting company that they used the Cotter model, and they kind of changed it up, the Cotter change model, and they kind of changed it up for their own, consulting company's unique brand. And in behind the scenes one day, all the principal coaches, we were talking about the model and how they're using it, and they're putting in their sales calls and they're going to the clients. And someone said, anybody know how to do the culture piece of this? Does anyone know what we're supposed to do there? And these were like senior level. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're in trouble. That's like one of the most important parts. So I think I'm saying all that to say that it puts it right in your face. So the model says it's inherent to it. You have to address leadership and mindset. You have to address culture and relationships. You have to address your behaviors and the practices that you're using that are supportive of agility. And you have to address your systems and structures. And they all co-arise together. If you start there, everyone's like, yes, yes, yes. Because all Agile coaches know what they're struggling with is the mindset and the culture. We keep going at it from the right side of our framework. We keep, like, for years, we keep saying, oh, here's a framework, here's SAFe, here's LESS, here's DAD, here's, Scrum, here's Kanban, here's more training, here's, more stuff, objective, things you can touch and feel. And it's not solving it. And we keep year after year. If you look at the version 1 survey, if you look at the business agility survey now, the same top 3 reasons why people say that transformations fail. The same top 3. Don't know how to go about change management, culture, and leadership. Mm-hmm. Said maybe slightly differently, but the same top 3 reasons every single year for years and years. So why do we keep just saying you can throw another framework on it, or another training, or another practice? So this framework, and so I guess I'm saying, Jeff, I'm answering the question by talking about how I talk about it a little bit to keep it simple. Like not going in the whole theory behind integral, because that's kind of like being in a history class when you were a kid and you're like, boring. Like I can't get interested in history the way you're talking about it. And that happened to me early. And now I love history, but I had the worst teacher as a child. And so I didn't want to hear all that boring stuff and the dates and the who's who and all that stuff. Tell me stuff that's exciting and that's going to help me. And so that's how I try to talk about it. So I start with the quadrants and what we're experiencing. And then you can layer in the colors. And then people start getting it when you say, you're trying to come in with green, like I said earlier, but your organization is mostly about achievements. What's your goals? What are you going to accomplish for me? Who's the boss? The hierarchy. That's all amber and orange. And so we're coming in at green. And when you just talk simply about it like that, I think people can resonate with that. I mean, do you resonate with that? Did you resonate with that when you first heard it?
I did, yeah. I think I'm trying to think of the first time I heard about integral. It was kind of confusing, and I was like, "What's going on? Why do I care about this?" Because it was a little bit academic,
Yeah.
But I guess for me personally, I'll kind of go on this. I think you have to respect where people are at, because we all go through different things and we all go to different spots at different times.
Yeah.
And so it's okay that, I went really heavy over into the, focusing on myself and the I quadrant up in the top left. And that's okay. That's done. That meeting's done. And now I need to figure out why I got triggered that way. And I need to figure out how I'm going to inspect and adapt and change that. And I think that's the awareness, like I was kind of saying before. I think that's a big thing. And then being okay with I'm going to make mistakes, and then this is how I'm going to adjust to it because I now have this awareness. And so maybe that's something for people to take away from it is you won't be perfect, but at least you have a language for it now, which I think is really great because we never had a language. I maybe have always felt it even before I knew about this framework, but I didn't know how to articulate it.
Yeah,
and that's what I really love about it.
Beautiful. It's like people would always say this after they attended my class, even just when I did the simple 3-day class. They would say, okay, at the end of this, I had all these different thoughts and I've gone through a lot of these stuff experience, but I now have this wrapper around stuff. I have a place to put everything. Now this totally makes sense. And I love how I can think about it differently. And the other thing I loved what you just said, Jeff, is you pointed to the quadrant orientation. So I'm a professional integral coach from Integral Coaching Canada. When I did that, that program, the couple of programs, the integral framework. So using the two together became so much more powerful for me. And you just pointed to the fact that we all orient differently. So when you look at it, you might you went to the upper left quadrant. In integral coaching, we call it upper left, upper right, lower right. So many people go to the lower right or go to the upper right. Like the people that are really action oriented go to the upper right because they want action. They want the doing. That's what upper right is. It's your behavior. It's your actions. Mm-hmm. So many people orient there. So when you think about our different orientations, and Integral Coaching Canada actually has these videos that you can watch, and it's pretty funny. They go about it from a little bit of a humorous way, and they're about the native orientations, quadrant orientations in meetings. So you go to this meeting, and you wonder why sometimes everyone's not on the same page. Because if it's let's just say the way they talk about it, it's like this new project, you get put on this team and it's your first meeting and you get in the meeting and one person's like, yeah, this is really exciting. I say we just jump in. Let's create a list of to-dos. And then you got another person who's lower. That's the upper right orientation. The lower right's going, and they're thinking this, likely not saying it, thinking, wait, what? We can't just jump in doing things. We don't even know the big picture here. We need to see the whole structure and, the whole, what's been going on before, what's it impacting. They're a systems-oriented person. So they're already not getting along on how they're going to start this out. You got the lower left people going, wait a minute, we don't even know each other. We need to get to know one another a little bit first. Why don't we just go around and introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about our background? You got the upper right guy about having a heart attack about now because he's saying, oh my God, we got to go into this relationship. They sent around bios and stuff like that. Why do we need to get into that? That's so touchy-feely. So the upper right guy and the lower right guy are like, oh God, here we go with the fluffy stuff. The upper left person is going, I don't know if I really want, I don't know if this project is something I believe in or I value, or if it's aligned with what I want to do. I really need to understand it more before I can say this is something I can feel and be a part of, or I'm going to feel out of integrity. So then that person's taken a very different angle. So I love that you pointed to your own, when you first heard integral, you went to the upper left quadrant. And so everybody goes where they first orient. So it's not that you don't think about things from all the other three quadrants. It's likely your native place, like a native tongue. If you're an English speaker,
Yeah.
you get
You have a default. You kind of want to go to a certain spot, right? Like,
yeah.
and that's okay. And you just have to recognize, like, I'm going there, and that's okay. Like, and now what am I going to do about it? How do I see everybody else angle?
And when you know this, so I just gave it for our own examples, but when you know this stuff and you start really getting this, you can go in a meeting and you can be sitting there observing, going, oh my goodness, I can see this thing in action right now. This person wants to get going. This person wants to get to know people, and we're not on the same page. Now there's all this unconscious stuff in the agenda here. And we can't get to the wisdom and potential of our group until we get to what's here, what's present. And that requires, some sensing into what's present. And so knowing this, having that frame of, I see what's happening here, first from a quadrant perspective, because that's the easiest in my mind. And integral coaching, it teaches that one first. But then you can start talking about the altitudes and how people are showing up in the amber, orange, green, or teal.
Mm-hmm.
Can we take I'd love to take a giant step back, but it's kind of related to what we were just talking about. You mentioned way back at the beginning of the podcast how you were going through your career. You climbed that corporate ladder, and then at a certain point you got into coaching. And what I'd love for you to dive into just a little bit is we use that word coaching all the time.
Yeah.
Like agile coaching, right? Like, well, what does an agile coach do? What does coaching mean to you? Like, what did you learn when you became a professional coach or got that professional training in coaching? And how did that change your leadership style and your approach to your day in and day out work?
Yeah. So rather than using all the coaching terminology, I'm going to speak just plain for people who don't know the ICF terminology and all that. Coaching is about being more in inquiry with people. So if you want to shift thinking, mindset, for instance, and culture. So if you want to work with the left side of our framework, your coaching stance is the most important stance. And leadership, like leaders of organizations, senior leaders, executive leaders, they are going through these CTI programs and leadership and university leadership coaching programs because there's a recognition in general, outside of Agile, completely outside of Agile, that leaders have to be able to take that coaching stance more. They have to embrace that part of their leadership. It's not all of their leadership, but part of working with human beings that have their own thinking and that have and their mental models come from their experiences. So I can't just tell you all the time and advise you or even mentor you. The shift in thinking comes only from inside of us. So any kind of mindset shift is generated from inside of us. Coaching, by going into powerful inquiry, asking those questions, not based on what we want to ask them, but based on what they're telling us. Right? So if people are using language, I'm listening. Coaching is so much about listening and not speaking. So I'm listening and I'm hearing words they're using, and I move with them in their way of being, in their language, and what seems to be important to them in this moment. And I may hear them say a same word over and over. But when I do this, first of all, they feel listened to because you're reflecting back to them a lot what they're saying to you rather than leading them somewhere. You're listening to what they're saying, so they feel more listened to. They immediately don't get on the defensive. So when we're training and telling people, notice. Agile coaches, you're making a good point. Agile coaches for a long time were just Agile trainers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was hiring Agile coaches for a long time, and it was hard to find somebody that got the coaching piece of it.
Yeah, the perception, if I'm hearing what you're saying, is that that upper right is what an agile coach does. They do the things, they
Yeah,
implement the teams, the practices,
yeah,
those types of stuff, those types of things.
yeah,
They're driving stuff, and
yeah.
that's not what a coach means in any other setting. So,
It isn't. It's not, so an agile coach isn't just a professional coach. So there's, we've got to make sure we understand the whole view here. Look at the whole view here, which is if I'm an agile coach, there is an expectation on the part of organizations that I know agile and I can teach them. Because how am I going to, if you're a coach, for a long time, it's the joke. And I think even Charlie Brown's got remember the 5-cent stand and lemonade stand? They're charging $5 for Coke, maybe 5 cents or something.
oh yeah,
And it's like, how do you feel? How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? So there's the joke that goes around about, yeah, we don't want an agile coach that's just going to come in the room and say, how does that make you feel 24/7? That's annoying, right? But
hmm
there's this need for moving into inquiry with people. So when I move into inquiry, it's because I can recognize where somebody is. So if I'm using my framework, I can recognize they're coming from an expert or an achiever orientation,
hmm
right? Like they're either the expert or the achiever. They're not coming in as a catalyst, and that's a developmental model. And if I recognize that, especially if they're the expert, let's start there. If they're the expert, there's nothing I'm going to be able to tell them more and more and more and more that they're going to just say, oh yeah, So now how am I going to work with them? I'm going to work with them by being with them where they are. That's the whole meet them where they are thing. And I'm doing that through inquiry, through reflection, through observation. And it's super, super powerful and it's so needed. But I have to also embrace the fact that I got to teach you Agile.
hmm
I got to come up with some strategies, at least that we're going to co-create together. Right? So both are needed. But what's been missing is the coaching piece of it. That's what's been
hmm
missing for so long. Now, more and more coaches are doing, Agile coaches are doing coaching training. And, I see Agile's made it into a lot of the coaching tracks into their curriculum. So, yeah,
hmm
it's great. It's fantastic. I love it.
So, Michele, at this time, is there anything you want to promote to our listeners or want them to take away from this conversation?
Yeah. Now, hopefully, I've said something throughout that sparked some kind of, new thinking. But if not, I guess if you haven't read the book and you're now curious and would like to read the book, when you go into reading the book, and I think we do a good job of saying up front our intention for the book. Hopefully that comes across as you read the book. But I would say that it's really this whole thing, this whole agile transformation thing. This is all about change. It's about change. And so agility, in my mind, agility is nothing more than getting really good at going through change. And I say that in the book. That was one of the things I said in the book, because at the end of the day, look at all the change we're going through the last few, personally, the whole COVID, and then we get a new variant. Like we're going through so much change in our lives right now. And it's not easy. It's hard. It's a shift for us. So a lot of times the first question I ask people when we do a talk or something like that is, think about a change you recently had to make in your life. Just take a second and think about a change that you were asked to make or you had to make because of the situation. Now think about how you went through that change. You as an Agile coach, how did you go through that change? Journal, write that down, think about it. So in my mind, it's holding compassion for ourselves as we're going through change, because change in and of itself, unless we know the benefit, unless we say, okay, I can see this is going to be good for me, or this is beneficial, or I can see something that's going to help me, we sometimes resist it. That's our nature as human beings. So think about how you go through change and hold compassion with your organizations that are, there's a whole thing going on right now where people are talking about, should we push change? Should we force change on organizations? I don't know if you've been hearing and seeing the writings about this.
Some, but tell me more.
Yeah. So it's just like, I just saw a bunch of stuff on LinkedIn and even a podcast about, right, should we be forcing change on organizations, on people. And when I talk about organizational change and how to use change methods and be in that organizational change aspect of the OD piece of it, no, we don't push change on people, because when you push change on people, they feel victim.
Yep.
They get into the drama triangle, where you're the victim, the hero, and the villain. They feel I'm a victim. You're pushing change on me, and I feel victim to it. And if I'm in a victim stance, then I'm not above the line. I'm below the line with this whole thing. And you're going to feel me below the line. So if you feel people reactive and below the line, likely they're feeling like a victim in some way. So the more we push change on people. So yes, you're there for a reason. The organization hired you to do this. And how you go about it is going to determine your results. And that's the thing that we all need to hold. It's not even what we're doing half the time. I mean, because we could be doing anything. It's how we're going through it, how our way of being in it. And so when I can be with people, hold people with compassion and understanding, and really trying to come from looking as them, not at them, looking as them. What do I see? What fears do they have? What's happening right now? I can hold that compassion, and then I can come from that lens, and they won't immediately want to buck everything I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. That's good lessons, because that's where a lot of, I think, us are as change agents. I get that question very frequently. It's like, well, what do you do with the people that are resisting change? And it's like, well, why are they resisting change? I love the way you phrase that. So great takeaway points. I think there's a lot of great stuff in this episode. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. It was fun.
Thank you for listening to the Agile Wire. We are consistently inspecting and adapting ourselves. We would appreciate feedback at feedback@theagilewire.com or on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play Store. See you next time.